Bum da dum dum, da dum, ba ba dum dum, ba 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 ba, ba ba dum dum, da da dum, ba da 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 da, ba ba dum. Whip and Wing by Ferrin. Chapter 1. Found. Loose rocks and fine gravel crunched under hoof as Derry Dew lay as softly as she could on the mountain path. The adventuring Pegasus wheezed for a moment, glad of the chance to catch her breath after her hurrying flight through the mountains. She stood stock still, waiting cautiously for any sounds of alarm from the gray, squat shape of the nearby temple. The mayor's dark pink eyes searched the empty windows of the foreboding edifice, but she saw nothing. No sign of watching guards, no sign of surprised cultists, and most importantly, no sign of Ahuizotl or his minions. Excellent! Daring Do started forward, treading lightly to keep the sound of her hoof steps masked under the morning of the mountain winds. The skies boiled with high, churning clouds and occasional flash of lightning. It was not a good night to be out for any pony, especially not for anything on the wing. While thunder growled through the heavens, the golden-pelted mare flashed a quick grin at the helpful storm brewing above her. No pony would even think that a brash and reckless adventurer would have braved the skies on a night like tonight. But no pony else knew what Daring do about this nature of her current search. If Ahuizotl got his claws on that medallion before she did, getting slammed to the unyielding side of a mountain by vicious gusts of wind, blasted by the sky by a bolt of lightning, would be the least of the Pegasus' worries. Taking advantage of another peal of thunder, she cantered forward and reached the temple's main gates. 40 hooves tall and made of unyielding weathered oak, the doors to the Temple of Shadow loomed over Daring Do as he trotted up the last few steps. Passed through the forbidding space between the gate's guardian statues, ignoring the frozen snarls of the grotesquely twisted griffins. Reaching the threshold, she paused. The doors were slightly ajar, opened just wide enough to admit a single pony. Perhaps the adventurer was not as unexpected as she had hoped. After a quick scan to assure that the opening was free of any obvious trap, the Pegasus vaulted through the door in one fluid motion. She landed on all fours, wings flared as she readied herself for the attack. But no pony was there. The wind whistled through the partially open doorway, as if following Daring inside. But nothing else stirred save for the thick cobwebs waving gently in the breeze. "Hm!" Daring had grunted, adjusting her signature pith helmet and folding her wings to her sides. The Pegasus knew she couldn't relax yet, not until she and the Medallion of Shadow were both safely back in Canterlot. On the long dark corridor passed a carefully memorized diagram in Daring Do's mind. She took a step forward, straining to see through the omnipresent gloom. A quiet chuckle escaped the Pegasus' lips as he murmured, "I guess they really do take the name Temple of Shadow seriously." Every book Daring Do could find about the mysterious temple and its fabled artifact told of terrible curses to any pony who brought light into the temple's inner sanctum. Of course, such ancient curses were unlikely to still exist without a unicorn or other spellcaster to renew them from time to time. But stranger things had happened. Besides, Daring was a professional adventurer. She'd make do. Chuckling mentally at her pun, Daring Do crept along quietly, scanning the area around her for the usual nasty surprises that awaited any treasure hunter in places like this. The rough-hewn grained stone of the floor was filled with suspicious cracks and holes, all promising a world of pain for any pony unlucky enough to trigger the booby traps waiting within. She nimbly sidestepped a carefully concealed pressure plate. Now for the first time, the Pegasus wondered if there was some pony out there crawling through the tombs and dungeons to ensure that the hinges on the spike pits were in good working order. What would a trap maintenance cutie mark look like? The idle thoughts did nothing to ruin Daring's concentration as she vaulted over a pit and landed lightly on the other side, dodging out of the way just in time as a hidden bronze blade sliced through the air where she stood and retracted back into the ceiling. Nasty. She had to remember that one for later. A dim yellow glow at the far end of the corridor suggested that some pony in the temple was more interested in watching him step than in ancient threats of dire curses against bringers of light. Daring Do moved closer, glad of the extra illumination despite the grim warnings. Hey, it wasn't like she was going to get cursed for using the light somebody else had brought. She peeked around the corner, muttering softly to herself. I wonder if that's the trap maintenance pony. If it was a theoretical trap maintenance pony, he brought friends. Lots of friends. The wide, vault-clean ceiling room was full of milling impressive bodies, flickering and shifting in the dim torchlight. Ponies and diamond dogs and other creatures all faced the center of the room. The crowd may have been unidentifiable in their long, flowing green robes, but Daring Do could identify them instantly from their droning, tonal chanting, and the rhythmic, synchronized swaying. Cultists! Daring Do groaned to herself. She suspected as much. It was a horrible thing, being right all the time. Why always cultists? Brothers and sisters! Shrilled a thin and reedy voice from the gathered throng. The conjunction is near! Soon, if we are worthy, the old ones will return for us! Tuning out the rest of the crazed ranting, the Pegasus glanced around the room and tried to plan her next move. Cultists all said things like this. Sometimes they were even right. But was this even the right place? As Daring Do surveyed the green-robed congregation, something caught her eye. Clearly dully on the pedestal in the center of the cavernous room was the Medallion of Shadow. There was no question about it. The plate-sized half-disc had a strange metallic sheen, unlike anything the adventurer had ever seen before. Even from this distance, she could tell that she finally found the object of her quest. The medallions of Ahuizotl were nowhere to be seen. She won the race. Daring allowed herself a quiet smile. Even if the cultists were the only thing standing between Daring Do and victory, they were still a problem. But one that the experienced adventurer knew how to deal with. A quick glance around the darkened entryway to the temple's inner sanctum revealed a few extra robes folded neatly off to one side. Like the ones on the cultists in the ceremony, they were a vibrant green with an embroidered snake emblem slithering across the fabric. Daring's smile widened. She tugged on the foul-smelling robe, flipping up the hood to conceal her chalk-curled mane and signature pith helmet. A few moments later, another robe-swept cultist joining the massed throng. Groaning in a tonal chant slightly lower than every pony else, the newcomer followed her brother in a languid swaying dance around the raised dais in his artifact. Each rotation brought Daring closer to the middle of the entranced congregation and closer to the dark gray treasure on full display at the center of the mob. Soon, the Medallion of Shadow would be hers. Dr. Henry Indiana Jones winced an incautious step and sent a baseball rock flying across the path. The stone reached the edge of the precipice to his right and dropped, clattering loudly as it struck various outcroppings on its trip down the wind-swept mountain. The archaeologist froze for a moment, listening for any sign that his approach may have been detected. Fortunately, there was none. Indiana Jones started moving again, before the frigid gust of wind assured that he was frozen in more ways than one. He had been forced to leave his thick wool-lined coat behind in his room at the inn. Under the circumstances, a stealthy and unexpected incident was worth more than the comfort of cold-resisting clothing. This was hardly the first time that the archaeologist had braved frostbite, and it wouldn't be the last. As long as he kept moving, he'd be fine. Buzzing his fedora down a bit against another blast of icy wind, the shivering man trudged up the slope, crested the ridge, and saw it. White polished stone glared by the fleeting light of the storm-crossed moon. A faint smile glistened across Wendy's empty, wind-burned face as he examined the tableau beneath him. There it was, the Temple of Light. If the manuscripts and clues he had painstakingly collected were right, that was where the archaeologist would find what both he and Hitler's lackeys sought. Medallion of Light. Oh, Celestia, please tell me I get to do a Nazi voice! Graving slowly down through the sharp-edged rock formations and onto the path leading up to the temple, Indiana Jones made a careful search of his surroundings. The area seemed safe enough, but it was by no means uninhabited. The flickering torchlight streamed out into the slightly open door of the white stone structure. Who would the archaeologists find inside? It could be a temple of monks, busily performing rituals that had lasted through the centuries. It could be common traders or bandits, taking up shelter on an unpleasant night during their travels through the Hindu Kush. It could even be some of Himmler's butcher boys, lying in wait for Dr. Jones and already possessing the second half of the artifact that will let Hitler's eager army simply appear out of nowhere onto the streets of Paris, Washington, D.C., or London. There was only one way to find out. Readying himself for a fight, Indiana stepped through the door. Warm yellow light from the flickering torches greeted Indiana Jones as he looked around the entryway. Despite its remote location and advanced days, the ancient monastery was entirely innocent of dust or cobwebs. Stepping through the door was more like walking into the foyer of a museum, kept up by accuracy-obsessed caretakers, rather than the dilapidated ruins Dr. Jones was used to seeing. Despite himself, the archaeologist started to relax. The faint hiss of steel slicing through the air sent Indiana into motion, adrenaline burning through his veins. By the time the viciously sharp blade slashed through the spot where the archaeologist had been, he was already diving forward and tumbling across the cold stone floor. Dr. Jones rolled to his feet, pistol sliding out of his holster as he finally caught sight of his foe. The brown-robed man closed the distance with his scrambling victim before the surprised archaeologist could bring his pistol to bear. One foot whipped out, it sent the partially raised firearm skidding across the smooth floor. Indy ducked sideways and heard a metallic clank as an ascending double-bladed knife wedged a crack between the two stone slabs. Swearing in some unidentifiable tongue, the man jerked desperately in his trapped weapon. Surging upwards, Dr. Jones slammed one sleepy fist into his opponent's chin. The swarthy man's teeth clicked together as his head jerked backwards. He stumbled, giving the archaeologist time to get his footing. Still grasping for breath, Indiana followed up his punch with a brutal knee to the man's stomach. He threw his opponent hard to the floor and turned to sprint for his pistol. The dazed fire went down, falling forward past Dr. Jones. As the robed man crumpled to the floor, he let out a strangled scream. Panting, the archaeologist clenched his firearm and turned out to squeeze his shot. There was no need. Indiana Jones's fallen opponent lay still. Too still. Moving carefully, the archaeologist approached his foe, turned him over with one cautious foot. Somehow the guard, or whatever he was, had fallen onto the raised end of the double-bladed knife and was stuck firmly into the floor, stained with the blood of its former owner. The bright red pool was already sliding into the cracks between the stones as the smooth floor eagerly drank the fallen man's lifeblood. Reholstering his unfired pistol, Dr. Jones started a careful search of his vanquished foe. The man had very little on him, a bit of the local currency, a small bottle of some foul-smelling alcohol, and great, rash marks. Indy looked around, seeing the Temple of Light with new and even warier eyes. He had given his pursuers in town a slip, but their agents had gotten there ahead of him after all. He was expected. Any sensible man would have turned around right then and there. The archaeologist sighed, rubbing one hand against his double-coated chin. He couldn't turn back now. According to the government agents who contacted him, the Nazis were making no effort at all to search for the Medallion of Shadow. A sure sign they already had it, or didn't think they needed it. Indiana Jones ground his teeth. He had to do this, foolish as it was. Well, he had been in worse spots. Moving quickly, Indiana began to strip the body of his former opponent. Thanks to the dark color of the robes, the stain of his ex-owner's blood should pass through without notice, hopefully helping its new owner to do the same as he snuck through the temple. Dr. Jones walked down the corridors of the Temple of Light as quietly as he could, head down and hood surrounding his face. He strode down a dimly lit hallway, turned a corner, and nearly ran into two bruised thugs clad in robes, much like the man who had attacked him. It took Indiana a split second of frozen surprise before he remembered himself. Bobbing his head and grunting a hasty greeting, the disguised archaeologist hurried past and continued on his way. One of the guards made an unintelligible comment about raw recruits. The other laughed. Both continued on their way, oblivious to the outsider in their midst. Finally, after what felt like hours of twisting, turning passages, Indiana Jones reached the center of the temple. According to the text, the innermost shrine of the Temple of Light was a large, circular room with a high ceiling that opened up at the top to let in the light of dawn. The archaeologist looked up. The domed ceiling stretched up into a circle of black nothingness, almost too high for the anemic Johnson's light of the torches to reach. The distant howling of wind seemed slightly louder here, and the torch's flames guttered slightly in a breeze that had been mostly absent during Dr. Jones's quiet trek through the temple. This certainly seemed like the place. The curved white stone of the room's walls seemed to focus all illumination into the center, where an ornate pedestal sat on the raised dais. The pedestal seemed to glitter as reflected torch flames danced on the surface of the plate-sized silver emblem that lay there. Even from this distance, Indy could identify the Medallion of Light. It was here, nearly within his grasp. Something had to be wrong. Something always went wrong at times like this. Dr. Jones swept the huge room carefully with his eyes, trying to pick out any signs of the ambush that had been waiting for him. Nothing was there. The chamber was entirely innocent of guards, and there was no obvious traps. Although, of course, the archaeologists knew from painful experience that no obvious traps did not mean no traps. There weren't even any snakes. Had the stealthy journey from the mountain inn to the temple gained him the element of surprise after all? Delay was getting the increasingly suspicious archaeologist nowhere. A clock had started ticking the moment he failed to find an adequate hiding place for the dead guard's body. Hell, a clock started ticking the moment he left the inn. If he wasn't back soon, someone would notice. If Indy's thanklessly small number of allies noted his absence, well, that wasn't a complete disaster. When the enemies found out, he would be fending off attacks all the way back to the U.S. and likely beyond. Better to go in now, while he was ready, than to get caught sleeping later. Footsteps ringing unnervingly loud in his ears. Dr. Jones started forward. He moved with the apparent lack of a hurry, keeping up the pretense of nonchalant belonging for as long as possible in case some easily deceived watcher was waiting for him to make his move. He was across the floor, stepping onto the dais now. He was at the pedestal. Indiana Jones paused for a moment and looked down at the shining half-disk of gold before him. The design seemed almost to swirl and change as the light of the torches flickered on the medallion's light raised surface. The archaeologist scrutinized the pedestal, looking for signs of hidden mechanisms. He needed a repeat of that incident with the boulder in Peru, like he needed an extra hole in his head. Astonishingly, the stone pedestal and its priceless treasure seemed entirely untrapped. Dr. Jones could hardly believe it. All he had to do was reach out and, "Ah! Dr. Jones, I presume." In contrast to the soft and unrelenting turn of the German accented voice, the metallic click of the safety on the Nazi agent's pistol was very loud and threatening indeed. Indy raised his hands. He sighed and turned around slowly, already suspecting whom he would find pointing the pistol at him. He was right. "Guten Tag, Herr Jägermeister." "Guten Tag," the tall German replied with a chuckle. Keeping his pistol trained on the waiting archaeologist, the man in a long black cloak waved with his other arm. Brown-robed guards by dozens fled into the room, brandishing pistols, rifles, and the cruelly double-bladed knives that the Indies' first assailant had used. The Nazi agent smiled. Everything was going according to plan. All was in order. "Oh, Dr. Jones, you did not think we would not notice you taking leave of the cozy little inn. The light arts are everywhere." "I so guessed. Well, Hans, you got me. The Medallion of Light is yours," thought Indy slowly, stroking Jägermeister's ego and playing for time. Moving his hands cautiously, he dropped his hood. The archaeologist was going to need his field full clear of what came next. It wasn't as though the blood-stained robes were any use as a disguise now. "The Medallion of Light is mine? Of course it is, Doctor. It was mine all along. I simply waited to make sure that I had you as well," he agreed. His grin widened. "Well, aren't you going to take the medallion?" It would not have been possible for Indiana Jones to become more suspicious than he already was. Somehow, he managed.
"What? Why don't you take it?"
The German's laughter echoed in the high-ceilinged chamber. "Oh, no, Dr. Jones. I think you should do the honors. After all, you let us here. Besides, do not forget who has the pistol in his hand and who has it pointed at his head. Indiana Jones turned around again and faced the pedestal. The mirror-like glitter of the Medallion of Light seemed somewhat less alluring now that the agent didn't want to snatch it up just yet. Taking a deep breath, he reached out his hand and stopped the mirror's breath away from the artifact. What the hell was that? A strange shadow swam before the astonished archaeologist's eye. The room seemed filled with strange, moving shapes, all swirling in a circle around the dais. There, immediately opposite Indiana, was a shape clearer than the rest. Crouched low on the far side of its own pistol, it wavered and grew more distinct. Slowly, the shape sharpened to focus, and Indiana Jones saw. Daring Do stepped up to the hulking creature on the opposite side of the pestle. She managed to sneak into the center of the cultist without any pony noticing. Trusting her luck to hold, the Pegasus had seen a few steps out into the crowd onto the dais. The congregation of cultists droned and swayed around her, their unnerving ecstasy rising to the feverish shout. She needed to hurry. Soon, one of them might notice the adventure's hurrying movements, and more than the over-enthusiastic devotion of a recent comfort. But now this thing was there, floating threateningly on the far side of the Medallion of Shadow, with one clawed arm outstretched. Could Daring risk getting closer to that strange ethereal beast? She hesitated. Behind Daring Do, a diamond dog cultist caught sight of her and howled a warning. Others took up the cry, and soon every eye in the room was focused on the adventurer. The Pegasus' breath quickened. No, not once he was so close. She had to get the artifact before Ahuizotl, and no pony. Nothing was going to get it first. Indiana Jones felt his heart thudding in his chest as he watched the four-legged apparition approach the Medallion of Light. It seemed to be staring up at him, gleaming eyes peering out from under some sort of hood. The archaeologist's teeth grated. He hated dealing with the occult. Why couldn't legends contend to be legends? Why did they have to become real? When the dark creature lunged forward, Dr. Jones reacted. Almost without a conscious decision on his part, Indy's arms shot out and grabbed the Medallion of Light. He grasped it firmly and began to jerk it away, only to throw himself out of the shadowy thing's path. When the towering dark shape stretched forth its arm, Daring Do leapt into action. No weird shadow creature was going to get her prize. She bounded forward, teeth clamping firmly on the metallic half-disc of the Medallion of Shadow. For both adventurers, the world exploded. Indiana Jones threw up his free hand to shield his face. Everything was a brilliant white. He shouted and squeezed his eyes shut. It made no difference. He opened it again. At least, he was sure he had. The only thing that felt real was the heavy feel of the artifact in his hand. Looking down his arm, he could somehow still see the Medallion of Light, and the creature on the other side of it. Daring squeezed her eyes shut against the sudden flash of shearing white light. It didn't seem to matter where she had her eyes closed or not. She felt like she was floating. Not the normal feeling of weight, perfectly balanced on her wings as she got in flight. But as if gravity simply wasn't a concern. The only real sensation she had was the feeling the Medallion's shadow between her teeth. She looked up and stared at the tall biped on the other side.
Who are you?
Who are you? Daring managed to ask around the edge of the artifact between her teeth. As soon as the questions were out of their mouths, both adventurer and archaeologist felt an unpleasant pulling sensation. The twin medallions seemed to be sucking at them, pulling them in. There was a feeling of speed and falling. Both artifact holders felt a sudden, yet not painful impact of their bodies crashing together. There was another brilliant flash of light. Then, nothingness. Chapter 2. Lost. Daring Do blinked away the spots in front of her eyes, and fought to stay upright as a wave of nausea crashed over her. What was going on? She had been talking with some pony. Her head throbbed as though her brain had swollen several sizes larger than it should be. Her mouth was full of taste of metal, although that was at least normal, considering as she clicked her teeth onto the half-disc of the medallion. She shook her head clear and glanced around. The only thing that kept her jaw from dropping at what she saw was her iron will to keep hold of the Medallion of Shadow. The dark gray stone and vaulted ceilings of the Temple of Shadow's inner sanctum had been utterly transformed. Flickering torches hung on the walls, polished white stone in the airy circular room. The howling mob of cultists went silent. This was not because they were overawed by the sudden flash of mystical light, but because they were simply not there anymore. In their place stood a confused group of creatures, the same of hulking biped that literally snatched away Daring's prize. The Pegasus was unsure whether that was an improvement or not. Rubbing its eyes, the closest of the creatures glanced around the room and focused on Daring. It stared, seeming almost as surprised to see her as she was to it. Then it screamed, "What is this? What is the thing? It has the medallion! Sight it, I say! Shoot it! Sneer!" The shrieking creature pointed one of its long forearms at Daring Do. Before the mare could react, there was a small flash of light and an ear-shattering explosion. The adventurer winced as something smacked to the ground near her hooves, sprayed star-showed splinters into her pelt, before whizzing off with a buzzing sound, like an angry, oversized torrent. Daring leapt back, blades firing as he tried to take to the air. Daring Do's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't fly! Her wings shifted awkwardly, their movement arrested by the clinging green robe. What had been a covering disguise was now a deadly prison. A second explosion from another creature sent another raised torrent whizzing past the Pegasus' ear. What kind of magical weapons were these creatures using? Were those guns? Daring had seen something like the biped's weapons back during the business with the crystalline chalice. That diamond dog, what was his name? Sport? Had attacked her with something that flung small stones at lethal speed. But it had only been a prototype, and these creatures had so many. How was it possible that any confused wanderings went to the side as another bullet cracked past the adventurer? With no place to hide and no way to escape, Daring had only one option: attack. She might have been more comfortable fighting from the air, but years of treasure hunting meant that she was no slouch on the ground. Hooves clattering and adrenaline sinking in her veins, the desperate mare galloped forward and leaped, slamming her front hooves into the chest of the dark-clad biped, and first fired at her. He sat in surprise and went down, a strange gun spinning out of his claws and clattering across the smooth white stone floor. All right, that was one. The adventurer's hoof thudded into the prone creature's throat and left him gagging as he stumped to one side. Daring Do rolled, avoiding more gunfire, and moving so fast she had practically left a streak in her wake. One of the brown-clad creatures on the opposite side of the room screamed and fell, a dark spot staining his robes as an incautiously aimed shot missed its mark. Deciding that guns were obviously too dangerous, the brown-robed bipeds whipped out ugly-looking double-ended knives. A single overeager beast rushed forward, howling the same inarticulate war cry as it threw itself at Daring. She dodged the swinging blades, only just. Suddenly an idea occurred to the beleaguered Pegasus. She grinned and tried to taunt the creature around the medallion in her mouth. With a glare of hatred, the creature lunged forward again, lemon squeaking even faster than before. The others were conversing by as well. Daring Do would only have one chance to get this right. She exploded into motion. As Daring's attacker swung his knife down, the Pegasus dodged, but only just. Hissing through the air slightly too late, the slinging blade missed the mare's flesh. Instead, it caught the edge of the cultist's robe as it trailed a split second behind the pony's movements. The snake and bright green cloth parted under the sharp metal edge, and a long gash opened in Daring's former disguise. Laughing in triumph, Daring Do spread her wings with explosive force. The winking cloth of the cultist's robes tore neatly and sheeted out the Pegasus, leaving her free at last. The exultant pony lifted into the air and darted out of reach. With vagrant shouts and even a few thrown knives chasing her charcoal-colored tail, Daring beat her wings for altitude and soared upwards towards the top of the dome. She took the opportunity to slip the medallion under her pith helmet for safekeeping. Now finally free for a proper taunt, the grinning mare shouted, "Hey, you creeps! Tell Ahuizotl that Daring Do said very luck next. Whoa!" Tips of rock and masonry dust exploded in a stinking cloud next to Daring Do's head, cutting off the Pegasus mid-taunt. She darted out at the large opening in the roof, and a second bullet from the recovered dark-clad creature zipped past her wing. Hans Jägermeister stared up at the empty hole to the sky, and slowly lowered his still-smoking pistol. He quickly transitioned his angry glare to the captain of the mercenary guards. Don't cough! You let her get away! Find her! Find her now! But how? The salty mercenary stammered. struggling with both an unfamiliar language and the bizarre events of the past minute. He quailed and waved his hand blankly as the German's pistol keyed back up, barrel locking as the muzzle of cannon. We find! We find! Ja, you better, Hans snarled. How many creatures like that can there possibly be in Hindu Kush? Hans Jagermeister didn't bother watching what the guard captain did next. The dim-witted subhuman nodded desperately and started shouting commands to his shocked men in a babble that the locusts had the audacity to call a language. But the German wasn't listening. Instead, he stared back up at the sky and massaged his aching throat. What was that little horse creature? Hans had never seen anything living move so fast. Perhaps, if she could be captured alive, he might have two prizes to give to the Reich. The German smiled. Yes, that would be perfect. He could just imagine the looks on his superiors' faces when he handed them not only the Medallion of Light, but also, what had the creature said her name was? Ah, yes, Daring Duel. The only one left nagging question. What had happened to Indiana Jones? Far above the plotting German, Daring Do tumbled through the rolling maelstrom of winds and angry clouds. Wings flapping, she fought desperately for control and altitude as the roaring currents of the sky whipped her this way and that. The wind was even colder and more forceful than it had been when she entered the Temple of Shadow. Simply staying in the air was a struggle as the Pegasus battled the combined fury of the elements, the howling of the freezing wind, and the near irresistible pull of gravity. With the burn of adrenaline fading, and leaving the lean fatigue in its wake, Daring Do knew she needed to find her way to shelter as quickly as she could. She glanced at the dark shapes of the mountains below, waiting for her finely tuned navigational skills to help her orient herself. Everything seemed completely new and unfamiliar. Alright, things could look very different in the dark. If not the ground, Daring would use the constant sky. She navigated by the stars and moon before. The mare looked up, waiting for the boiling clouds to clear long enough for her to locate the moon and get her bearings. But when the silver disk finally showed its face, it was the facades of a complete stranger. The exhausted Pegasus could only stare in mute incomprehension. Where was the mare and the moon? Now a better question. Where was Daring Do? The sinking feeling in the adventurer's chest had nothing to do with the way she was losing altitude. But losing altitude she was. The Pegasus mare rode in the air current back away from the jagged teeth of the mountain ridge, where she ended up splattering herself across the rocky hillside. She hovered as best she could and glanced around, looking for any signs of habitation. Wherever the disoriented mare was, she had to get out of the storm before things got any worse. A faint yellow glow to her left drew Daring's attention. Light twinkled from the small collection of buildings, ringed by a tall wall and clinging to a dark precipice. A long, light strip of land that might have been a narrow road crawled up the valley, going past a little cluster of blocky structures. Intermittent moonlight and the golden glow of torchlight sparkled intermittently on the turning surface of the mountain river that tore down the valley past the inn and its road. That looked like a good shelter as any, so the pony angled towards it and struggled as best he could towards her goal. 15 minutes of flying filled the sudden drops, and close encounters with the landscape left Daring Do even more exhausted than before. She nearly collapsed when her hooves touched the ground in the courtyard of the mountain inn. The Pegasus trotted slowly up to the largest building and hammered on the door. The portal was nearly as large as that of the Temple of Shadow, but unlike the temple gates, the door to what must have been the main part of the inn remained shut, and the windows dark. Daring hammered hardly on the door again. There was still no response. Grumbling under her breath, Daring Do circled the large structure, looking for another entrance. Tonight was not a good night for the adventurer. Every door was barred and unresponsive for knocking. Every window was closed with heavy wooden shutters, and it looked as though the Pegasus was going to have to brave the elements and sleep outside. She had been in worse states, but the ghost of a smile flickered across Daring's face as she found what she was looking for. Above her was a second-story window, its open shutters shifting slowly, despite the force of the howling wind was putting on them. A short burst of flapping strained the mare's already taxed muscles, but she let her scramble over the window-sill and into the inn. Thankfully, the room was empty, and it had a bed. That would do for now. Tugging at the shutters, the Pegasus managed to pull the window closed and shut out the mountain gale. Only the barest hint of light seeped through the window now and into the room, but it was enough for Daring Do to take in the room properly. In the faint twilight, the mare's dark pink eyes surveyed their temporary belongings. With everything twice as large as it needed to be, this was probably a room the inn provided for creatures like those odd bipeds she escaped from not long before. Hopefully, this room didn't belong to one of the ones that attacked her. She had to be on her guard, especially since the door to the rest of the inn didn't seem to be barred. Daring Do yawned hugely. Now that the icy blades coming down from the mountain weren't chilling her and keeping her awake, the built-up fatigue of her adventures were catching up to her rapidly. She had intended to get inside and rouse the innkeeper to pay for her room now, but her bits would likely be as good to him in the morning. Even with the foul smell that lingered over its heavy woolly blanket, the crackling straw mattress of the bed felt almost as soft as a fluffy white cumulus to Daring's exhausted body. The Pegasus sighed in relief and wormed her way under the covers. Thanks, Celestia. She was victorious yet again. Tomorrow she would get an early start and have the Medallion of Shadow back in Cartelot in a few days at most. The bone-tired Pegasus slid the artifact out from underneath her helmet to take a look at the Medallion of Shadow and her prize once again. When the blood froze to Daring's face, it had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. She stared down at the glaring half-disc between her hooves. It glittered in the wan ambient light of the inn. This wasn't the Medallion of Shadow at all. If its shiny silvery surface was anything to go by, this was the artifact's twin, the Medallion of Light. But that was impossible! The mare could have sworn that the medallion hadn't left her teeth the entire time she slid it into her pith helmet, and certainly no pony could have switched it while she was in the air. This was worse than a simple setback. This was a disaster! How had Daring Drooping's eyes widened as he remembered the blinding flash of magic that brought her to the strange place. Ahuizotl had been seeking the medallion's shadow to allow her to cross into a world with a single step. She was somewhere else now, even further beyond the borders of Equestria when she started. It couldn't be. There was no place in the world where the moon looked like the one she had fleetingly seen in the cloud-streaked sky. The exhausted mare thought back to the shadowy shape that had reached for the medallion at the same time as she. What was one of Ahuizotl's agents too? Plus this world of Daring Do's mind. But the energy was nearly gone. The Pegasus felt her eyelids dragging downward as her head bobbed forward, as he struggled to maintain a coherent thought. Finally, she gave up. These were important questions, but could wait for the morning. With another yawn, the golden-paralleled mare slid the newly gained Medallion of Light under her helmet. Daring settled into an uneasy sleep. As Indiana Jones rubbed the spots away from his eyes, the sound of groans and pain exclamations assaulted his ears. What was going on? That had been strange. He could remember grabbing the Medallion of Light. Then a feminine voice saying, "Something?" Indiana's vision finally cleared, and he stared out into a scene of some kind of fairy tale. Everything had changed. For once the room was adequately lit and built of shining white stone. Now, the woefully small number of torches barely managed to illuminate the huff-hue gray of the chamber that was little better than a glorified cave. The high dome had been replaced by a claustrophonically near-vaulted ceiling. Most pressing of all, a Nazi agent and a few dozen mercenaries had been replaced by a multitude of things. A confused glamour filled the air, and some of the green-robed creatures rubbed at the glaring eyes with a heavily clawed paws. Others were covering their face with what looked more like hooves than hands. Indiana Jones was sure he caught the glint of torchlight off the beady eyes of some sort of beaked horror. Archaeologist was no stranger to unholy and the supernatural, but so marvelous of it was at once a blow to his mental equilibrium. He knew he should react and do so quickly, but instead he simply stared. The recovering mass of creatures stared back. Guessing he perhaps had another few heartbeats of peace, Indiana Jones forced his body into motion. The dark hole of a doorway on the far side of the room beckoned to him. If he moved quickly, he might be able to get out while every thing was frozen by surprise. Slipping the Medallion of Light into one pocket of his leather jacket, the archaeologist started forward. That did it. A rasping voice broke the temporary silent peace. "A demon! It has the gate! Between the greater souls!" shrilled another when Dr. Jones quickened his pace. As if they were but parts of a single organism, the crowd rushed forward. Indiana Jones surged into action. One of the larger monsters was nearly his size. It leapt into his path, paws raised. The human's fist cracked out to crush the beast's sensitive canine nose, and it went down. Howling in pain, a startling horse thing hurried forward, only to receive a boot to the side of the head when that sent it sprawling across the rough stone floor in a heap. Now the inhuman multitude was coming at the embattled archaeologist all at once. He glanced out against the few, sending them and their allies tumbling away. But that was only the first flick of spray ahead of the crashing wave that was the mob's attack. Despite his huge size advance, there was little Indiana Jones could do against such numbers. One dog-like creature grabbed at his arm. Something too short and shadowed for the man to see clutched at his leg. The green road monsters piled on, biting and kicking and howling in anger to bury the fighting human under their weight. For a moment it seemed as they might triumph, but that moment passed. Sounding his defiance, Indy surged up the world and whirled, swinging a little horse creature to knock back everything within reach. The living bloodshed shrieked as Sergeant Jones let go, allowing the thing's momentum to send it rolling into its fellows, knocking them down like so many bowling pins. Archaeologists sprinted through the hole left by the tumbling horse thing's trajectory, and headed for what he had hoped was the exit as fast as he could go. The mob was quick to give chase as Indiana tore through the shadowed passages, leading away from the main chamber. He was making good speed. Then, as his foot slammed down, he heard a wholly inappropriate noise for an ancient and cave-like passageway. A soft, mechanical click. Oh no. Indy threw himself headlong into the darkness of the hallway, as something shot out of the rock behind him and buried itself into the opposite wall. The archaeologist started to climb to his feet, only to have his hand touch another pressure plate. A series of darts hissed through the air in rapid succession, tugging at his blood-stained robe, and was nearly catching the fedora of the prone man's head. The halls were packed more thickly with booby traps than anywhere else he had been. Moving was probably not a good idea. Unfortunately, moving was the only thing Indiana Jones could do. The pack of monsters was catching up. He could hear them roaring up the passage. Hoping that his reaction time was faster than the trap designers had prepared for, the fleeing man stood up and began to run the gauntlet. He took a few steps forward, axe dropped from the ceiling, slicing the air like lethal pendulums, but just missing the hem of the archaeologist's robe as he managed to leap not under, but over the swinging blades. A pit trap bristling with spikes yawned open in front of Indy's feet. To his pleased astonishment, the trap seemed only to be a few paces wide. Stretching his legs, he leaped over the gap in a single running bound. The man's breath rasped like sandpaper in his throat as he dodged through the forest of spikes that shot up from the floor. He ducked and dove past a cloud of bats that boiled out of the ceiling, whirling and weaving like a mad dervish. Indiana Jones hurried through the trap-lined corridors of the transformed temple. Screams filled the air as behind the fleeing archaeologists, as the more enthusiastic pursuers began to encounter unsprung or reset booby traps. Indiana Jones rounded a corner, dodged a too-slow circular blade that slid out of one wall at knee level, and continued running. It was amazing. Things never went this well when hightailing it through trap-filled corridors away from angry mobs of natives. Indiana's train stop broke off for a moment, as his steps triggered another shifting ancient gears and pulleys. The floor ahead of him dropped open. Rough gray rock was disappearing suddenly as the pit opened. It would have been impossible to jump over, if Indiana Jones had been a man 2/3 as tall as he really was. Nearly every single booby trap seemed to be built with someone much shorter in mind. Almost grinning now, the archaeologist sped up and prepared to fold over to the too narrow gap in the floor. Actually, only nearly every single trap was built for someone shorter than Indiana Jones. As he approached the pit, his toe caught a nondescript lump in the rough-hewn floor. Fast as lightning, the long blade dropped from the ceiling floor in front of him. The sprinting archaeologist had just enough time to whirl sideways out of the way. It moved to set his forward momentum. With a horrified shout, he tumbled into the pit and slammed against the far wall. His fingers scraped at the edge, and he dropped. The floor slammed shut behind him. An only darkness and a sensation of falling. Surprisingly enough, the pit was neither near bottomless or filled with spikes. Dr. Jones yelled in agony as he landed heavily on the unseen floor. Pain shot up one leg and he collapsed, groaning. Indiana Jones lay still for a few moments, trying to rise above the pain to get a feeling of surroundings. Cool sand and rock below him, nothing above. No sound save for his own breathing. No hissing of snakes or skittering of tiny treacherous legs. No sliding of closing walls and rising spikes. Whenever he landed, it didn't appear to be deadly. At least, not right away. First things first. Taking out the ragged and blood-stained robe, Indy grasped the fabric with both hands and tore off a long strip. He wrapped the cloth around his dropping ankle, partially immobilizing the sprain. There, that was better. He checked his pocket. The heavy weight of the half-disc medallion was still there. All right. Next, the archaeologist reached up to his head and found his head resting on his skull without the comforting interruption of his fedora. Once a short respite gave Indiana Jones his breath back, and his ankle stopped hurting so badly, he pushed himself up and began to search his surroundings slowly and carefully with one hand. After a few cautious moments, he found what he was looking for, and moved his fingers slowly over the surface of the fedora. It seemed no worse for wear, thank goodness. The relieved archaeologist placed the hat back on his head and started probing the rest of his environment in earnest. With agonizing slowness, Indiana Jones explored the lightless pit. Rough stones surrounded him on all four sides. In the darkness of his hands met smooth, strange shape piled haphazardly against one wall. Rocks? Dropping one experimentally resulted in a howling, rattling sound. Bone, then. The archaeologist wasn't the pit's first victim. Indiana fell over the bones of the off chance that his fellow victim might have been carrying something useful. The archaeologist wiggled his brow in puzzlement at the strange shape that passed under his hands. This wasn't the corpse of a human. Had some animal fallen in, or, grasping at what could only have been a hoof, Dr. Jones thought back to some of the weird, bestial creatures that had attacked him and chased him into this trap. He stumbled across a tribe made up of several previously undiscovered species. Tales of strange and wonderful creatures filled with every tone of mythology, but up until now their existence had been mere conjecture, fairy tale. Even those like Indy who operated under fringes of traditional archaeology. Indiana dropped the bones. Whatever it was that he found, it wasn't helping him get out of here. He put aside thoughts of cryptozoology for the moment and looked up. It was a pointless gesture for a man who couldn't even see his hand if he waved it in front of his face. But at least it helped him strengthen his neck as he thought about his next move. With only a bit of soreness and sprained ankle, Dr. Jones could tell he probably hadn't fallen far. The rough fence of the sides of the pit meant he might be able to climb the way he came in. Without any light source, it was impossible to tell whether opening the trapdoor from the other side was even doable. Archaeologists decided to delay scaling the sheer walls until he ran out of options. Instead, he continued to run his hands over the rough walls of the pit.
Come on! Come on! Ha!
There it was. Along the side of one wall, the groping man could feel an unnaturally straight crack rising vertically in the rock. Indy's fingers gloated over the smooth chisel edge of the crack until he reached a corner where the line turned 90 degrees. A bit more, and the so-called crack turned again. He found a cleverly concealed passage. It seemed somewhat small, but sliding along through a cramped tunnel on hands and knees was vastly preferable to starving to death or risk a second fall trying to climb out of the mouth of the pit. Now the trick would be finding the door's catch, if there was one. A roughly circular depression cut into the rock at the shin height caught the attention of Dr. Jones's questing fingers. This would be his way out, or it could be the trigger for a particularly malicious trap. With starvation as most likely alternative to trying his luck, the archaeologist pressed the concealed switch. The soft click of rumbling machinery in motion, and a gust of air blew past Indiana Jones as the passageway opened. Still wary of booby traps, Indiana Jones grubbed for the bones and came up with what was probably a long leg bone. He bent nearly to double to crawl into the passage. The unlucky creature's bone tapped softly against the rock as the cautious archaeologist explored the route ahead of him with his makeshift cane. Progress was agonizing slow, but steadily quiet efforts took Dr. Jones further away from what could have been an unpleasant end. Nothing to do but pull himself forward and tap out the path in front. Indy occupied himself by reviewing the strange events of the recent past and trying to inject some kind of logic into his bizarre day. The temple he had fled through seemed nothing like the one he had entered an hour before. Strange and nightmarish creatures had appeared, replacing the threatening but still unquestionably human enemies who had menaced the archaeologist before he had touched the Medallion of Light. As if responding to his thoughts, the medallion in Indy's pocket clanked dully against the rock of the constricted passage. Indiana Jones felt for it, but making sure it was still firmly in place, it continued moving. His thoughts swirled around the lenses of the artifact. A yellow page of Latin text, translated from an even older one of Sanskrit, has spoken of the twin medallions' powers. The eclectic owner traveled to the world in a single step. A chill run around Indiana's spine, even as he continued crawling through the narrow tunnels. Just where had he ended up? Was the half-disc of ancient metal in his pocket connected with these strange events? More importantly, the archaeologist was in fact a world away. How could he get back? There was a lot of time for Indy to mull these questions over as he dragged himself along, muscles burning with the constant exertion of the day. With the poisons of fatigue sapping his will, he felt himself slowing down. Finally he stopped. In the sunless tunnel through the heart of the mountain, the archaeologist had no way of knowing what time it was, but his body was nearly ready to give out. It was time to bow, however, temporarily to the inevitable. Indiana Jones settled himself comfortably as he could in the rock and closed his eyes, trying to rest. In the tomb-like stillness of the passage, a faint breath of cold air washed over Indiana's unturned face. His eyes snapped open again, although it made no difference. Another cool sapphire. Hey, bro. Fumbled the adventurer's sweat-licked hair. If there was fresh air, that meant suddenly desperate for an escape from the claustrophobia of the tunnel. Indiana discarded his Estraz robe. The lake bone rattled on the stone floor as Indy crawled by it, making for the source of the breeze as fast as he could. It only took him a few more moments of effort to reach the end of the tunnel. He broke out into the open air and shivered, immediately chilled to the bone by the howling winds. Perhaps discarding the bloody robe had not been a good idea after all. Having just escaped from the clammy grip of the mountain, the archaeologist found himself considering returning to the wind-blocking embrace. He needed to find shelter, and fast. A glimmer of cold blue light caught Indiana Jones's scurrying gaze. Hat clasped firmly onto his head with one hand, and the collar of his leather jacket turned up against the wind. The archaeologist struggled down the side of the mountain towards what could be his doom, but would hopefully be his salvation. The exertion of his movement kept at least a minimum amount of warmth in his flesh as it neared the lights. It would have to do. The exertion of his movement kept at least a minimum amount of warmth in his flesh as Indy neared the lights. It would have to do. The steady white-blue lights glowed as bright as any electric lamps back home in the States, almost as bright as the floodlights of the airfield at Casaba. And yet, there was no throbbing mechanical roar of a diesel generator to be heard. The lanterns simply hung on from the walls, sadly pushing back the darkness. They ringed a surprisingly mundane collection of structures, much like the ones Indy had so irreverently left before scaling the foreboding mountains to the Temple of Light. On the far side of the structures, a long ribbon rugged trail unrolled to the darkness of both directions alongside the rumbling torrent of a rushing river. Somehow, he had arrived at what looked like an inn. Lying back exhausted, Indiana Jones loosened his pistol in its holster. The inhabitants of this inn were as friendly as the ones he met back in the temple. He would need it. Sitting his weight, testing his ankle. It was holding up well despite the earlier sprain. Perhaps it wasn't as badly injured as he thought. Good. Taking a deep breath, he stalked up to the gates of the wall surrounding the compound and hammered on the steady wooden planks. There was several minutes of knocking and increasingly annoyed shouting before a few filing it open into a heavy wooden gate. Blue eyes glared up from the vicinity of Indy's navel. A gravelly voice carried through the thick wood of the portal and howling wind. "You're someone, aren't you? What do you want?" So they used English here. Indiana wasn't even going to ask how that worked. English speaking or not, the speaker behind the door was trying to establish dominance. That wasn't going to happen. The archaeologist kept his voice curt and harsh as the doorkeeper's.
A room.
You woke me up out of a sound sleep on a night like this to answer the gate of my inn, instead of timing your arrival before sunset like a normal pony, and you can't even bother to say... The innkeeper's irritated tirade broke off as the Indiana Jones jingled a leather bag filled with coins, clanking it miserably against the fuselage. The eyes on the other side of the door glittered, and the voice reformed itself into something more polite. "Oh, well, that's different then. Just you?"
Just me,
Indiana agreed and added.
but I'll have some friends coming along by in a few days.
The lie was safely impossible to disprove. In Indiana's experience, strange travelers are journeying through the Hindu Kush alone, and with money made tempting targets. Hopefully, the implication that someone might look for him if he went missing would help delay any thoughts that the innkeeper might have of doing away with his newest guest, and save on the cost of providing room and board. Then again, These definitely didn't seem like the mountains Indy was used to. When the innkeeper finally opened the door, his eyes widened further. So did Indy's. The archaeologist had simply assumed the voice behind the door belonged to someone shorter than the norm. Instead, he found himself staring at a brown-pelted horse creature, much like some of the ones he had so recently fought in the strange passages of the temple. The little horse creature returned to stare and let out a low whistle. "By Celestia's flank, what are you?"
I could ask the same question,
Indiana muttered. The cold night sent a gust of icy wind through the tired archaeologist's clothing. He shivered for a moment, weighing his options. "So, are you coming in, or—" the strange innkeeper prompted, shifting from foot to foot. "No, from hoof to hoof." Indiana set his jaw and forced his hand to draw from the holstered pistol. Whatever the hell this thing was, it wasn't attacking him. Ducking his head, he stepped in through the gates and looked into the compound. There didn't seem to be anything more of the green road creatures waiting in ambush here. The gravel courtyard made the perimeter wall glow blue with the same lights that hung in the walls. A field of buildings, none more than a single level tall, clustered around a large two-story structure. It looked much like any mountain in which Indiana Jones had seen in his travels, with the exception that everything was slightly undersized. It seemed to be run by something the archaeologists would have expected to see in a petting zoo. "You haven't answered my question," the small brown horse prompted. "I'd like to know who I'm dealing here when I see a new face, and yours is, very new. No offense meant."
I'm a paying customer. Well, I might pay a bit more if you started answering questions instead of asking them.
Indiana said flatly. He jingled his bag of coins again. The coins inside clinked luridly against each other. The fires of avarice kindled anew in the little innkeeper's eyes. Solely eager to please, the little horse, more of a pony really, hurried to bar the gate. With an irritating grin, the little creature waved one foreleg towards the tallest structure of the compound. "Of course! Right this way, gentlemen. Please follow me." Shaking his head, Indiana Jones followed the little pony towards the inn proper. He kept his gaze active, darting from one shadow to the other as he looked for any signs of a trap. The archaeologist had dealt with many bizarre and unexpected things, but this was probably high on the list. He chuckled, trying to imagine what else sharing the inn with him. Perhaps a mermaid on the holiday from the sea. Or maybe a dragon. Perhaps this was some kind of strange dream, and when Dr. Jones woke up, he was staring down the barrel of Hans Jagermeister's Luger once again. That was a thought. But until then, he would have to take things as they came. Once the archaeologist discovered the fact he was speaking with a miniature talking horse, it was really no different to dealing with the usual infernal rabble of mountain folk. That would help, but one thing was for sure. This promised to be an interesting night.